Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Milton Kane. I'm the Christian Democratic Party candidate for the federal seat of Newcastle. I'd like to talk to you today about some matters raised during the Q&A that was screened on ABC television tonight. What we had was the Prime Minister answering a series of questions that were being raised by young school children in New South Wales. I actually find it very fascinating, some of the answers, particularly when it came to answers regarding issues about the Middle East. There was questions raised about a nuclear Iran and why people were so much against that situation, whereas they were not opposed to a nuclear power base within Israel or some other democratic country around the world. There were some suggestions about the rights of Palestinians, and there were some questions about Israel killing, as it were, thousands of Palestinian people, and about the attitudes in regard to all these matters. The Prime Minister's answers were fairly standard, and in some regard many would say they were pretty much the open par of what is occurring today. But they do show some lack of history, of understanding of the history of the Middle East from both the student's perspective and also from that of the Prime Minister. I think it's important in these matters to examine the history of seeing where we came from and how we got to where we are. You see, the whole of the Middle East area prior to World War I was basically under the control of the Ottoman Empire. And that was destroyed during that particular war, their control over that area. What actually happened as a result of that, there were several areas which were given to the victors, to certain nations within the victory nations, to administer those lands and to bring about some degree of self-government for the people within those areas. What we had is north of Israel in the Lebanon to Syria, what we had is a French mandated area where the French were to take charge of bringing the people's rule into those areas. The area immediately below that, which contained the area which today is Israel, and also it contained the area of Jordan and Iraq. And what we had in there, we actually had the British mandate, and Lord Balfour was the person involved. Now, the particular issues in point is that particular area of the mandate which was referred to the Palestinian mandated area. Now, the Palestinian mandated area was an area essentially south of Lebanon and north of Egypt. Lord Balfour decided on a two-state solution to the situation there. Lord Balfour could have created a single state if he wanted to, but he chose a two-state solution. He recognised there was a number of Jewish people wishing to return home to the country of their heritage, of their forefathers. And so what he did was he created a two-state solution. And the natural dividing line for that two-state solution was the Jordan River down through the centre of the Dead Sea, and following that through to the Gulf of Eilat. Now, when we recognise that, what we actually see is there was two states. One was a state one side of the Jordan, and the other was the other side. So what you actually had was Jordan and Transjordan, in other words, over the Jordan. Now, interesting thing was that there was no name given to the land which is currently called Israel. No name was actually given to that. It was just simply called the Palestinian Protectorate. And Palestinian citizenship was being offered under a British-style Palestinian citizenship was being offered. And it's surprising that virtually no person of Arab, either Christian Arab or Muslim Arab, actually accepted that citizenship at all. The only people who did accept that offer were, in fact, as I understand, Jewish people. There may have been a few, but very few, if any, of the of the Arabs or the who were Muslim or were Christian. The Druze, there were some Druze who were involved in the area, and they, by and large, did not accept that citizenship right either. Now, we had, as I say, the establishment of a two-state. We had Jordan created, and the state where Israel was to be was, while it was to be predominantly a place where Jewish people could call home, it was, as I say, it wasn't given a name, but also the Arab community that wanted to stay in that area, they were welcome to stay. Now we have to remember that these people did not actually own the land by and large. The land was essentially owned by absentee landlords. And these absentee landlords, many of them sold some of this land to Jewish organizations, and the Zionist Foundation bought many parcels of land from these people. Now, through various circumstances, we had promises being made to and fro for cooperation during the soon-to-become Second World War, where this was where the muddiness all occurred. When the British government, wanting to have the cooperation of both the Jewish community and the Arab communities, during the time of hostilities with the Germans, where the Turkish people were a part of that conflict, what they did was they made certain offers of inducement to get their cooperation. Some of those offers were being made at different levels by different people, and some of those offers were actually contradictory, where some people were being promised the same land and same circumstances. These were never able to be fulfilled, but that's one of the things that happened during the course of the war. Unwise, but that's what happened. After the war in 1948, May 14, in fact, David Ben-Gurion declared the state of Israel to be a fact. At that point of time, the neighbouring new Arab countries and their tribal leaders told the Arab communities to leave Israel immediately. They were going to declare war upon this new fledgling state, and that within a few short weeks or months they would be able to return, and because they would have destroyed this Zionist state. Well, it didn't happen. Surprise and surprise, the Haganah had which was an organisation of resistance against the British people to protect, protecting the Jewish communities there during that particular time. The Haganah, which became and formed the major part of the newly fledgling state's military, the Israeli army, as it soon became, was able to, in spite of horrendous difficulties, was able to maintain a presence in the Middle East. Much land was taken off of Israel, and some of that land was recaptured. Israel became a very narrow strip of land along the coast of what is currently Israel today. And then there was a ceasefire which was declared. Now, there was war after war after war after war that occurred, and the Arab people were unable, no matter how much they tried, and no matter how much of their rhetoric, to throw the Jewish people into the sea as they promised, and to destroy the so-called Zionist state. During the course of all these actions, when each time there was a conflict, one of the things that was significantly important was that Israel was regaining the land which the Lord Balfour had granted to this Jewish state. And each time there was another inch gathered, everybody was complaining, and they got on the back of Israel and they told Israel to stop all conflict, and there was this another peace agreement. Now, during the course of all of these conflicts, the Arab nations noticed that it was impossible for their armies to defeat the nation of Israel. And so what they did was they segregated from their military groups of people who would form organisations which became essentially the terrorist organisations of the Palestinian Liberation Organisation, and there was a person who was to head many of these organisations, and his name was Yasser Arafat, who was heading one of those organisations, and he became the chairman of the group of resistance, terrorist organisations against the state of Israel. And much destabilisation was to occur as some of the military budgets of these Arab nations went into direct funding of these terrorist organisations. And they did not take their terror campaign directly to Israel all of the time. Some of the times it was to places in Jewish installations in other parts of the world. Hence you had the Munich problems, you had the hijacking of aircraft, etc. throughout the place, to try and bring everybody into line. The purpose of a terrorist organisation is to create fear, is to create the whole concept of people wondering what's going to happen next, and in this fear they will attempt to surrender to the organisation. Now, the breaching of the border by these terrorist organisations occurred on a daily basis, and that's a fact of life. Every now and then Israel would respond, and Israel would attack a refugee camp or some other organisation, some other base camp of these terrorist organisations. Now, one of the difficulties is what the media reports and chooses to report is something far different from what is the reality. You see, every time Israel will cross the border or fire a missile across the border or fly a jet over the border and to bomb some place, that gets the attention of the world. But the very fact that a terrorist organisation may shove mortars across the border day after day after day in a relentless manner, causing much of the population to live their lives in bomb shelters, and even having Israelis being killed by such action, what has happened is there is virtually a news blockout from this sort of effect. And so we tend to get the impression that the poor Muslim and Christian communities of Arab descent are out there and being attacked by big, strong Israel all of the time. But let me put it to you this way. If I was to fire mortars into your backyard how many mortars would I need to fire for you to choose to try and stop me from doing it anymore? Would it be 1? Would it be 100? Would it be 1,000? That's the question we need to ask ourselves before we see whether or not it was unreasonable for Israel to respond. There has been some lulls, some days when there has been no problems whatsoever, and we don't hear much about that, obviously, because news is basically bad news. We don't really publish good news very much. Now, the problem is that we need to remember, in 1948, all of the Arab nations declared war upon Israel. There has been some peace treaties which have been signed since then. There was a peace treaty signed with Anwar Sadat of Egypt. There was a peace treaty signed with the King of Jordan. There was a peace treaty signed with Turkey. There was an understanding between the Israelis and the Christian Phalange during the civil war, the Lebanese civil war, which in effect, if we must really know, it was a Syrian and Iranian-backed conflict to take over Lebanon. That's essentially what it was. Essentially, it was not totally a civil war in this general sense of the word, but rather it was externals, the Hezbollah that came from Syria, fully funded by Iran and Syria to actually deal with that particular conflict. There was much support given to them by others. Now, I do not claim for a moment that Israel has never done anything wrong. Don't ever hear me say that, because that's not true. But there are many things that we do not hear and that we should hear. Even though there has been a state of war, Israel has supplied money to deal with the fact of displaced persons. Through the United Nations, Israel has paid more than its share of contributions to the refugee fund. By the way, the Arab nations have not. The other side of it, which is very important as well, people talk about the humanitarian needs of the people, whether they be in the Gaza or whether they be in any other part of the Arab world. We find that the Israelis are in fact supplying lots of equipment, lots of food to the people in Gaza and to the other people in the so-called occupied territories. What we forget is that while it is true that Israel wants to check what is going into the Gaza, it is not because Israel is opposed to the people getting food and sustenance. What they are opposed to is them getting certain types of weapons. Because, let's face it again, if I was throwing bombs into your backyard, would you want to stop my supply of the material from which I make the bombs? And the answer is pretty obvious, yes you would. And so we ought to be able to understand Israel from that point of view. In recent days, we find that there has been a lot of bombs being put across the border, a lot of mortars going across the border between the Gaza and to Israel. And there's also been an increase recently from the northern area with the disturbances in Syria, with the civil conflict that's going on. Some of that has spilled over into Israel. And of course the Israelis are well and truly concerned. And I think you would be too if you were an Israeli. You would be concerned about these terrorist organizations who have decided that they wish to destroy your people, you would be concerned if they were getting their hands upon various weapons, including weapons where you deal with some potentially chemical warfare. And so with all that in mind, when we want to criticize Israel, when we want to talk about a two-state solution, we need to understand the history. And the history is very much different to what people think. You see, there is two states, Jordan and Israel. So there is no further discussion on a two-state solution. And the rightful place for the Arab communities who didn't want to remain in the state of Israel is within the kingdom of Jordan. By the way, the Israeli government does not oppose the fact that people who wish to become a part of Israel, if they happen to be an Arab person, whether they be Christian or Muslim, it doesn't matter to them at all. But the problem is when they are opposed to the state, and we wouldn't want people being opposed to our state and attempting to overthrow our state from within and doing acts of terror. It is interesting that the people, the Arab people, have a voice within the Israeli parliament. And that's a voice which has been there for a very long time. Now, just back onto the point about the humanitarian aid. What I think is important to note is that very senior officials within the Muslim world have had relatives of theirs who have been quite ill and needing urgent surgery. Incapable of getting a surgery within the Arab world, they have been operated on by the top Jewish doctors in the Jewish hospitals in the state of Israel and been given excellent care. People say there should be a peace treaty between Israel and the rest of the world, rest of the Arab world around. There are many friends of mine within Israel who would agree wholeheartedly. But you see, what we forget about peace is this. If my heartfelt desire is your destruction, you cannot have anything in common with me. You cannot for one moment talk peace with me. If I do not respect your right to live or to exist, you ought not to trust me in a peace agreement. Mr. Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian people, so-called, he has not, for one iota, admitted that Israel has a right to exist. He has not admitted that the Jewish people have a right to exist. In both of these counts, he believes that the state of Israel needs to be destroyed and that every Jewish person living in the Middle East needs to be thrown into the sea, dead or alive. Why should Israel talk peace with such a man? The leadership in the Gaza, they want the total and absolute destruction of the state of Israel and every Jewish person thrown into the sea. Why should there be any peace talks between the Gaza and Israel? There should not be. Until these people respect Israel's right to exist, there cannot be any agreement, any harmony whatsoever. It is ridiculous to suggest that there should be. It is unwise to even enter into negotiations. But what we've been taught to believe in recent days that Islam is a religion of peace. Because Islam means submission, and therefore it must be a religion of peace. Well, is it? If the submission is a voluntary submission, irrespective of what happens, if it's just voluntary, it is not a compulsion, then perhaps it may qualify. There is no room for Islam, there is no room for within Islam for people to be not of Islamic faith. For a person not of Islamic faith is an infidel and within the religion of Islam. If you are an infidel, the faithful to Muhammad are entitled to kill you at any time. A religion of peace? I think not. You see, the problem we have people who have been deluded about the story. We don't know what they're on about. We have no idea. The reason why they have no idea is because our education system chooses to misrepresent the facts of history. We need to make sure that we look at the facts. We need to be confident that we know the facts. I spent time in the Middle East. I know. And from that knowledge that I know, I tell you that we need to educate our people precisely about the truth. That does not mean that we praise Israel beyond the level of praise that Israel justly deserves. Nor should we condemn all Palestinian people because it's the leadership of the Palestinian people that caused the problems. I knew many Palestinian people happy to live within Israel, happy to be under the Israeli government, but they knew they dare not speak out, for to do so would mean certain death or at least injury to themselves and their family. You see, what we have a group of people who wish the total destruction of one nation. We have another nation prepared to live in peace and harmony with all their people around them, if only they would let them live that way. Benjamin Netanyahu said it well some time back, where he said, if the Jewish people were to lay down their weapons, there would be no more Israel. If the Muslim people would lay down their weapons, there would be peace in the Middle East. I can't say it any better than that. But you see, that is the story. And so the answer to the solution of the problems that we had in Egypt was to supply one group of people weapons over another. The answer to the solutions in Syria seemed to be the different nations of the world wanting to supply one group of people weapons against the other. And at the end of the conflict, will the people have a heart for peace? Will they have a heart for peace for their own people? Will they have a heart for peace for their neighbours? Oh no, they won't. They will have a heart for war. The more the weapons, the more the war, the more the death. I'm not afraid of war. Never am, never will be. But I hate it completely and absolutely. War does not solve anything. War proves we don't know how to solve our problems. That's all that war proves. We can't afford another war. Oh, it's not the money side of things. We can create that. We can get banks to print more money. We can certainly make more money any day we like. That's not the point. You see, the more we're at war, the harder it is to learn to live in peace. We need to start to learn how to live in peace and trust one another. The Christian Democratic Party wants to have a world of peace. Not a world of compromise, but a world of peace. We want people to be able to begin the process of learning to forgive, learning to trust, learning to repair the damage that we've done so that we can establish a firm foundation for peace, whether it be within this country or within the world community. We have a dream that one day this can happen, and yet on the other hand we know that unless the hearts and the minds of men are changed, it won't happen. The question is, where are you going to put your support? In a people who believe the only way to obtain peace is to kill those people who are resisting them? Or to put the faith in the people who are prepared to say, if you'll be my friend, I'm already yours and I'll live at peace with you. The question is, which way do you want to promote? If you want to promote a way of peace where we respect the rights of others, where we respect the rights of people to have a peaceful protest, then you need to go the way of the Christian Democratic Party. But if you believe the way for peace is to support violence against the people, then you'll need to choose somebody else. But you'll also need to build your bomb shelter or be prepared to die. It's open there for you. Which way will you jump? I'm putting my hand up as a fight for peace. A fight for peace in the manner which is most appropriate. A fight to demonstrate to people why it is important that we must permit other people to live with us, irrespective of how different their belief structure is. It's only through the Christian Democratic Party that you will get that process. It's only through the Christian Democratic Party will you get an understanding of what the truth was like at the beginning to what the truth is like now. You see, you can have various varieties of truth, but only one is true. You can have relative truth where you can second guess the truth any day of your life. That's not the truth I want. There is only one standard of truth as far as I'm concerned, and that's the standard of truth put forward by God Himself. And that's the standard of truth that I stand upon. When given the chance to vote, your vote will have implications, because your vote will either support a group of people who are vowed for terrorism, or a group of people who want peace. They're prepared to compromise because they know that war is not successful. They know that even though they can defend their country come all odds, they prefer not to send bombs to other parts of the world, but to send the value of their new inventions, to send the value of their expertise, to be able to spread their healing hand across all the nations, to show something of the God who created them in a manner worthy of the God who created them. Thank you.